sources that presenters have referenced so far, we will ask them if they are happy to share their presentations with us at the end, so that you can look back through those.
And also the any resources that have come out of this session, such as the slides and also the recording, will be available. I posted a link in the chat a bit earlier, but I'll put it in again now. We have an archive section in the Centre for Excellence on the events section. So here is a link for that, and you can get everything from today on there. Why don't we kick off? We've had a couple of lovely questions. Let's kick off. If anybody would like to take it, I don't think we've got time for everybody to answer them, but if maybe the people who have presented so far, I'm going to start with a question that Rob just posted, and then I'm going to go back to one that Ali posted earlier on, and then we can bring more in. And thank you everybody for adding in those links as you go in. So Rob has asked if the presenters could give an example of a moment or a turning point or realization point in the project that you were doing for a participant. So I suppose one of those light bulb moments where you see this is really working. And I guess they're the kind of case studies, aren't they, that funders are often looking for as well. So I don't know if any of the presenters so far would like to take that one on.
I will.
Thank you. Go, Kate.
For me, was discovering the fit between the way that practitioners in the NHS learn and the knowledge they need and the way that Forum Theatre works. It was an amazing, and ringing Cardboard Citizen saying 6 weeks before I submitted a big funding bid saying, would you work with me? And they said yes, because it's been the most amazing journey.
Thank you. Anything from any of the other presenters on that one?
One of our co-creators, Guadalupe, I think, like when she was exploring her story of migration, kind of, I think, came to a realization of why she left Ecuador, which felt like a real sort of realization and turning point for her, which was quite profound.
Thank you. Anybody want to dive in there? Yeah, Lindsay. Oh, and Pedro next. Lindsay.
In a second, I'll put a link in the chat to this, but I would say that we had a single turning point, but we had lots of them as sort of people's attitudes changed, and we tried to record some of that in a commentary that we wrote in the Journal of Science Communication. But things like, you know, kids coming in the door to begin with and not knowing what an engineer is, that's one of the questions that we ask. It's quite a good, it's quite a well-known kind of indicator of where their knowledge is about science careers. And when they came in, they didn't know what an engineer did. They had it mixed up with like a mechanic, really. And by the time they left, these two sisters, both of them Black heritage, were arguing about whether they should be chemical engineers or physics, or mechanical engineers. And so, you know, those kind of turnarounds are really nice. But if I put when we did the commentary, we tried to use people's voices and actual comments that they'd made to sort of tell the story of, you know, why their community was kind of neglected. The special edition, it was a special edition on neglected spaces in science communication. And our kind of thesis was that the communities, many communities, especially where people are living with socioeconomic disadvantage, are neglected. And sort of we were one of the few sort of groups to kind of come and do events right in the middle of you know, an urban centre in you know, southeast London, rather than in a university or in a, you know, big shiny theatre or something like that.
Thanks, Lindsay. Pedro, do you want to just come in there?
Yeah, for me, there was this aha moment when before the project actually began, when I started kind of looking at the relationship between futures and theatre, and we went to do these workshops with the unaccompanied minors seeking asylum in Greece. And we were in the middle of this workshop, this Futures Literacy Lab, which is a really like structured thing. And I was trying to apply theatre games to the structure of the lab with these futurists working alongside me. And we were in the middle of an activity which involved a bit of role playing. And it just gives me goosebumps just to talk about it, because one of the kids, at some point, they were doing something. One of the kids just raised his hand and said, no, they wouldn't do it like that. And he went in and he started performing. It was a Boal moment of Forum Theatre that happened spontaneously. And I said, we're really onto something here, because we were rehearsing and playing an imagined future. And this kid just said, no, it wouldn't happen like this. It would happen differently. And this is like, it just, so that was, it predates the current project that I'm talking about, but it's to do with this kind of territory that we're exploring. So yeah.
Thanks, Pedro. I'm going to move on, unless anybody else is burning, to Ali had a really good question. And this came in after the first couple of presentations, but I definitely think it's worth kind of bringing into the mix. And she said, she wondered if, can presenters reflect on the scope and scale of resourcing? There were some great examples, she says, mostly sound like very big budget multi-partner projects with a research component, and certainly a couple of them do. And I wonder if anybody wants to reflect on that, on the implications of it. Yeah, Mark, I see your hand go first. Anybody else, just let me know when you want to come in after. And Tony, we'll bring you in next.
Yeah, my feelings are, I guess, that I don't know how independent theatre companies or freelance creatives fund co-creative work, because it's incredibly expensive and it takes so long. And for us, our initial funding was from a commission from the Co-Creating Change Network, which was due to finish. It ran from February to, it was supposed to finish in May, and that was for £15,000. And then after that, we applied for more Arts Council funding from the emergency grant, and then after that, from a small grant from Unity Theatre Trust. So it was over 2 years. It was lots of bit by bit sort of things to keep the project moving on, but it was certainly exhausting and difficult. And actually, like, you know, I was aware doing a film about precarious low paid work that I was very low paid was doing it.
I think it's a real issue for the sector, isn't it? Thank you, Mark. Tony, you had something to come in on with this.
Yeah, I was just going to say that reflecting back on the project when we started sort of doing these consultations in the community, we applied to the EDGE Fund, which is, I understand, is a radical fund giver that gives money to radical projects. So we applied for them. I think we got £2,000 from them to do these workshops out in the community. But what was very, very important from the beginning is that we knew that we wanted to be so inclusive with this project. And so what that actually meant on the ground was that we weren't going to become an organization. We weren't going to become the typical kind of organization that you have the same people sitting around the table, having the same conversations about the same old. We definitely did not want to go there. And what did that mean? Well, it meant that we couldn't really constitute ourselves to draw down any public funds. However, what we did have to do was just keep on doing what we were already doing, which was to reach out into the community and just tell people about what we're doing and whether they had an appetite and the capacity to get involved. And a lot of them did. And so we had large cultural organizations like 198 Gallery or Raw Materials or the Black Cultural Archives, and small community groups who, you know, had a turnover of like, you know, £1,000 per year. And we had a whole range of different kinds of groups get involved. And when it came to drawing down some public funds to move us on, yeah, at the end of the day, our partners had the capacity to step up and say, right, they're going to take part in this particular slice of the cake to lead on this particular part. So everybody was able to kind of do what they wanted to do at their own kind of capacity. It was very chaotic, but it meant that we were able to keep things horizontal without any particular individual or organization leading on the whole thing.
That's really interesting, Tony. Thank you. Pedro, I think you were wanting to come in there.
If I can very briefly just flip the question. I mean, we are indeed, you know, we got money from the European Union, probably the last Erasmus project was something to come in. But in our case, it is at this point a well-funded project. But what we're hoping is that the outputs of the projects, they are toolkits for teachers who and people working with young people, who will be disseminated and will be used. So the idea is that, and they're will be open access because of the nature of the funding. So hopefully by the end of the project, whilst the project itself was very expensive, the multiplication and the dissemination won't, because people will have access to these and hopefully engage in futures work with young people and have a cascade effect. So there's something to be said about the use of the money and being able to access that. And so hopefully we're doing something with it that will have a sustainable, lasting life after the project.
Thanks, Pedro. Unless anybody else has anything desperate to add into that, I'm going to ask Marianne. Do we have? Oh, yeah, Lindsay wants to add something in.
So just quickly, in case it's of any use for future, one of the reasons we've been quite lucky is because there's quite a lot of funding floating around for engaging young people with STEM. So there was a particle accelerator in our show, and that is because the Science and Technology Facilities Council, which are one of the UK's academic research councils, have a public engagement unit with a fairly decent budget. And so we got funding from them and Royal Academy of Engineering, various other places. So if there's if there's an element that's ever coming into your work that's got Science for STEM attached to it, there are quite a few places that you can apply to for funding under different public engagement schemes.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Kate, I think Kate had something that
okay, great.
to add.
I was just going to add that this sort of work within research is very difficult to get funding, although things are changing, the winds are changing, but sort of participatory stuff. So this project that I was describing had a very small budget, but because it used theatre, and I think because it showed that both patients and practitioners are both oppressed in a sense, I think that a little bit like Tony was describing, a lot of the work was contributed, it's quite exploitatively for free by patients and practitioners, because actually it really engaged them. So, it's coming. There's a wind change coming. It's very difficult to get funding for this sort of work, even within research.
Thank you. Marianne, I think we should probably break now, shouldn't we? But there is a question I want to carry over, and just to let Emma know we've spotted it.
Yes, I spotted that.
Great question about what practical strategies people used to invite co-creators in at the initial stages. So maybe if you could kind of hold on to that question, people who presented this time and the people who are presenting afterwards, and then we could take that question as the first one after the next lot of presentations, if that's okay.
Fantastic. Thank you all for those really generous presentations and fantastic engaging questions too. We'll take a 10-minute break now till 8:40, and then we'll be back for round two. Thank you, everyone.
Though you can't hear us applaud, we are doing.